So Disney just got their training documents leaked. And this is where we can finally see what it is that they're telling their employees right now. And they're saying that these new documents are focusing on diversity. They're insisting that America was founded on systematic racism. And they're telling employees to reject equality in favor of equity, or the equality of outcomes. So I'll get into breaking a little bit about that down, why that doesn't make sense. But let's start into one of the most interesting portions of this, where they're telling employees basically how to behave towards black employees. So they're telling white employees that they should not question, do not debate black colleagues' lived experience. I hate this when they say lived experience, because it's like, dude, just because you had an experience in some way doesn't mean that it's the way that everybody else has had it, okay? And so it says, for example, are you sure they meant it that way? It's not a race thing. Or I'm playing devil's advocate. Instead, reserve judgment and offer statements of validation if someone shares their experience. In other words, say everything I agree with. Be like, oh, it must have been so hard. Oh my goodness. Like, I'm not gonna, like, let's just pretend that everything you're saying is completely true, even if it doesn't make any sense at all. Acknowledge and listen with empathy. When black colleagues share their lived experiences, avoid saying, I feel you, I've been there, and instead say, I hear you. Tell me more about what that felt like. Look, dude, if you're not interested in the story, I don't want to hear more about any of it. Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous when, they're really saying like, okay, don't even say it like, I sympathize with you. Like, I get it. Like, hey man, I've been there or whatever. Like, don't even do that, because you're white. You can never understand. That's basically what they're doing. How is this not a trick to divide? They want to pretend like this is unifying people. Wouldn't the unifying thing be to actually come to some kind of common ground? To relate to each other in some way? But no, what you're seeing them do is say, no, don't do that. Basically, understand that you never will relate to them, and therefore you are always separate from them in every way. So then it goes on to say, avoid conflating the black experience with other communities of color. While other people of color are subject to racism, there's a unique history that led to anti-black racism, and in ways in which that shows up. How in the world do they ever expect for people to be able to work together in an environment and not have to deal with this craziness going on? So the biggest issue I have with this is this section in here where it says, looking forward, and it's titled, Equity, Not Equality. This is telling of everything I've been talking about on the show from day one, that Democrats are not looking for any kind of actual equality. It literally says equity, not equality. And it says in there, equality is a noble goal. We should really be striving for equity, where we focus on the equality of the outcome, not the equality of the experience, by taking individuals' needs and skills into account. First of all, that's not the kind of equality that conservatives and normal common sense people are looking for. The equality that we're looking for is just simply the equality of the treatment in general, okay? Because if you actually look at the facts right now, we live in a very equal society. There aren't really any specific laws that only affect a certain race, except for affirmative action, of course, when we're looking at colleges. But that doesn't fit their narrative anyways, because that's only benefiting black students while disadvantaging white students, Asian students, and the like. But what they're talking about here is we don't want everyone to be equal, because the issue is that you cannot have equality and equity at the same time. They're not compatible with each other. So when they're saying these things, don't get it confused that for some reason that these two things can exist at the same time. You can only have one or the other. Because if your goal is equity, or what they're considering as the equality of outcomes, your entire focus is on where are these people going to end up? How do they end up in the same way regardless of what's taking place? Let's take a simple example of maybe just something like a race where everybody's running towards the finish line. And the equality part would say, hey, everyone starts at the same time. They start at the same place, no matter what they are, and you could have a very differing amount of people, black, white, Asian, this, that, men, women, children, adults, elders, all these people lined up in this race. What Democrats are focused on is that they're saying, you know what, when everybody finishes a race, we want them all to finish at the same place. What conservatives are concerned about is that we want everybody starting at the same point. We want to give everybody the same opportunity to achieve the goals that they choose to achieve. And by the end of that race, everything else being equal, you're going to have disparate outcomes. The older people may finish last. The kids might finish somewhere in the middle. The well-trained, more athletic people are going to be in the front. They might win the race. But it's not because the race itself was unequal. It's because of the fact that these people and their own things that they brought to the table made it somewhat unequal. But the race is equal. It's a level playing ground. There's nothing different about it. What Democrats are saying is, oh, well, if you're old, if you're this disadvantage, that disadvantage, this other disadvantage, you get to start halfway ahead of everybody else. You get a head start. That's what they're trying to do. Well, that's not equal, is it? That's not equal at all. Because what about the people that worked hard, the people that are more athletic, that are the right age, that would have normally won that race? Well, they can't win anything. Because as a result of that, because they're literally seeing themselves have to work harder to achieve the same thing that other people didn't have to work as hard to achieve, because they got to get a head start. These are the people that were more disadvantaged. That's the way the Democrats look at this. You can't have both at the same time. If your goal is to achieve equity, you must forego equality. And if your goal is to achieve equality, you must forego the equity at the very end. One or the other has to exist separate of the other. But the point is that they don't want equality. And this is exactly what we're talking about here. They do not want equality because that equality of outcome doesn't make sense. Because if you have an equality of outcome, you inherently have to have no equality at the very beginning of it. You have to disadvantage people. You have to give people unfair advantages that are in essence unequal to achieve this equality at the very end that they're trying to refer to. And this just proves what I'm talking about. They go on here as well, and they're also one of the ones that are trying to push these affinity groups, which is basically just segregation, just another word to try and cover it up by calling it an affinity group. But it's just by saying, well, it's blacks only. That's it. Because apparently we need to have our own race around each other to be effective at what we do at work somehow. So once again, Disney doing exactly what we expect them to be doing. It's just even worse when you see it on paper. It's worse when you actually see it outlined right in front of your face that they do not care about equality at all. They're telling you right there. And if you see this kind of stuff, pay attention to it. It's not equality. They don't want equality. They never have wanted equality.